You've been staring at the same crime scene photo for 11 minutes. You know because the clock on the wall of the precinct break room ticks loud enough to hear when the building gets quiet, and the building only gets quiet after midnight. And it's 12:43 right now, and you've been sitting here since 12:32, alone, holding a photograph that's already changed everything you thought you knew about the last 4 years of your life. You put it down. You pick it up again. The victim's name is Carol Reyes, 41 years old, elementary school librarian. Found 3 mornings ago behind a dry cleaning business on Morrow Street. Cause of death: manual strangulation. Body positioned face up, arms folded across the chest, eyes closed. Careful, deliberate, almost respectful, if you could use that word about something like this. This is the 5th one in 14 months. The task force has been calling him the Meridian Killer because all 5 bodies were found within a 2-mile radius of Meridian Avenue. The captain held a press conference. The FBI sent a profiler from Quantico who talked about organized offenders and cooling-off periods and signature behaviors. The mayor called the chief. The chief called the captain. The captain called everyone into a conference room and told them this stops now. You've been on the task force for 6 weeks. You and your partner, Danny Rourke, 12-year veteran. Commendations on his wall. The kind of cop who remembers victims' birthdays, who calls families on the anniversaries of their cases, who coached Little League for 4 years in the same neighborhood where he grew up. You've worked with him for 3 years. You've eaten probably 400 meals together. You know how he takes his coffee. Black, no sugar, always too hot. He never waits for it to cool. You know how he drives when he's frustrated, 2 hands tied on the wheel, jaw set. You know the specific way he goes quiet when a case is getting to him, how he stares at a point 6 inches above the horizon and doesn't speak for minutes at a time. You thought you knew everything about how he reads a crime scene. Except you just found something that tells you he doesn't read them. He writes them. It started with a shoelace. 6 days ago, you were reviewing the evidence log from the 3rd victim, a man named Philip Auerbach, found on a Tuesday morning in October of last year. Standard audit. Looking for anything the task force might have missed in the early days before the pattern was established. You almost didn't flag it. It was a single line in the inventory. 1 brown shoelace, found 12 feet from the body, logged as possible debris. Except Philip Auerbach was wearing slip-on shoes when he died. You requested the physical evidence. Signed it out yourself, didn't mention it to Danny, which you can't explain except to say something made you not mention it. Some instinct that didn't have language yet. You held the shoelace in a gloved hand under fluorescent light, and you thought about how 12 feet is too far for debris, and how the positioning of the body was too precise for someone who left accidental evidence, and how organized offenders, according to the FBI profiler, don't leave things by accident. They leave things on purpose. You pulled the evidence logs from all 5 scenes that night. You didn't sign them out under a case number. You told the clerk it was for a personal project, which is the kind of thing that sounds insane if you ever have to explain it later. You took photos of everything on your personal phone, not your work phone, and you drove home and spread them across your kitchen table and didn't sleep. By morning, you had found 3 more. A partial boot print at the 2nd scene that didn't match any victim, suspect, or responding officer. A fiber on the 4th victim's jacket that the lab had typed as synthetic wool, dark green, no match to anything in the database. And at the 1st scene, 14 months ago, a faint indentation in the soil near the body's left shoulder. Circular, about the size of a knee. Someone had knelt beside the body after death. The profiler said organized offenders often return to the scene. She didn't say they might never leave because they were already there. You started watching Danny 3 days ago. You told yourself you were wrong. You told yourself the evidence was circumstantial, that you were pattern matching because you were exhausted and the case was getting to you, that this was what burnout looked like, seeing monsters in the people you trusted. You told yourself all of that on the drive to the precinct, and then you watched Danny walk into the bullpen with 2 coffees and a file folder and smile at the desk sergeant, and something in your chest pulled tight and didn't let go. You watched how he handled the crime scene photos in the task force meeting. Most detectives look at photos like problems to solve. Danny looked at them like a man reviewing his own work. Not with pleasure. With something quieter than that. With assessment. The way an architect looks at a finished building, checking for deviations from the plan. You noticed other things. Small things. The way he volunteered information about the search radius before the profiler had finished her sentence, as if he already knew where the boundaries were. The way he referenced the 2nd victim's positioning as a deviation from the 1st, an observation so specific it required either exceptional recall or intimate familiarity. The way he never looked at the door during those meetings. Most people in a room discussing something disturbing look toward the exit at some point. It's reflexive. Danny kept his eyes on the board the entire time, steady and focused, the way someone looks at a problem they already understand. You went back through 14 months of call logs 2 nights ago. Danny was on shift the night before each of the 5 bodies was found. Not every detective is. Schedules rotate. But Danny specifically traded shifts twice in that window, once with a guy named Breckett, once with a woman named Liao. You pulled the shift swap request forms. Both were submitted more than a week in advance. Planned, not opportunistic. Scheduled. You sat in your car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before you went back inside. You watched people come and go through the glass doors of the precinct entrance, and you tried to find an innocent explanation for the arithmetic, and you couldn't. And the not being able to was worse than any specific piece of evidence you'd found, because it meant something your mind didn't want to finish forming. You know what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to take what you have to the lieutenant, or the captain, or the FBI liaison who has an office on the 4th floor and answers his phone on the 1st ring. You're supposed to follow the chain. That's the job. That's what 14 years of wearing a badge has built into your muscles. But what you have is circumstantial. A shoelace, a boot print, a fiber, shift swaps that could mean anything. A feeling that lives in your sternum and has no formal name. You know what a defense attorney does with that. You know what happens when you accuse a 12-year veteran with commendations on his wall of being the thing he's been hunting. You know how that story ends for the person who made the accusation if they're wrong. And you are not certain you're right. That's the part that keeps your hand away from the lieutenant's door. Not cowardice. Arithmetic. 5 victims. 1 career. The equation only makes sense if you're sure. And sure is not the same as this feeling in your chest that has been getting louder for 72 hours. So you've been building a file. Quietly. On your personal laptop, not your work machine. Encrypted. You've been making copies of evidence logs and case files and shift records and storing them. Place that isn't the precinct server and isn't your apartment. Because your apartment is a place Danny Rourke has been inside. He helped you move in 3 years ago. He knows the layout. He knows which drawer you keep things in because he stood in your kitchen and commented on your organizational system. He knows where you keep your spare key because he has one, because you gave it to him 18 months ago when you were going to be out of town for a week and needed someone to water a plant that died anyway. You think about that spare key now, and the thought has weight you weren't prepared for. Tonight you came in to access the physical evidence room. Alone. Late. You signed in with your own credentials because there's no clean way around that, and you told yourself the log would only matter later if something went wrong. And nothing was going to go wrong, because you were just going to look, just going to verify one thing that had been sitting at the edge of your mind for 3 days. Danny's duty boots. Size 11. Standard issue, same as half the department. Except the partial boot print at scene 2 had a specific wear pattern on the outer heel. Heavy supination. It's the way some people walk, rolling their weight to the outside of their foot. It leaves a distinctive mark, a shadow on the heel's edge that only appears after months of consistent pressure. You have been watching the way Danny walks for 3 days. He supinates. Slightly. Enough. You found his boots in the locker room an hour ago. You photographed the sole with your personal phone under the white beam of a flashlight. You compared it to the crime scene photograph on your screen, standing in a corridor that smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee, and your hands were completely steady the entire time, which frightened you more than shaking would have, because you felt like they should be shaking in the fact that they weren't told you something about where your mind already arrived without your permission. The wear pattern matches. And that's when you heard the door. It's 12:49 now. You put the photograph down. Carol Reyes, 41 years old, arms folded across her chest, eyes closed by someone who wanted her to look peaceful. You put it face down on the break room table because you can't look at her right now and think clearly at the same time. You heard the door 40 minutes ago. Building access log will show who badged in. You didn't go check because checking would mean moving through the precinct at 12:49 in the morning with a personal phone full of evidence photographs, and a file on your encrypted laptop, and a feeling that the person who just badged in might be the reason you've barely slept in 6 days. Your radio is on the table next to the photograph. Your service weapon is on your hip. You are trying to decide whether what you have is enough to make one phone call that changes everything, or whether making that call tonight, from inside this building, at this hour, is the wrong move. Whether it's smarter to walk out, get in your car, drive somewhere that isn't here, and call from a place that doesn't have a badge log and a camera in the corridor, and a man who might already know what you've been doing for the past 6 days. You are trying to decide how well you actually know Danny Rourke. Whether the person who remembered your coffee order and drove you to the hospital when your father had the cardiac event and sat with you in the waiting room for 4 hours without being asked is the same person who folded Carol Reyes' arms across her chest and closed her eyes in an alley on Morrow Street. Whether those two things can exist in the same body simultaneously, or whether one of them was always a performance staged for an audience of one. The FBI profiler said something in her second briefing that you haven't been able to stop thinking about. She said organized offenders of this type, often described by colleagues and family members as exceptionally calm under pressure. Reliable. The kind of person you'd instinctively trust in a crisis. She said this as a clinical observation. She had no way of knowing she was describing the man sitting 2 desks away from her. The break room door opens. Danny is standing in the doorframe in his jacket, keys in his hand, looking at you the way he always looks at you. The way he's looked at you for 3 years. Steady. Present. The face you've seen in your peripheral vision at 500 crime scenes and 400 breakfasts and 1 hospital waiting room where he sat with you without asking if you wanted company because he already knew the answer. Then his eyes drop to the table, to the photograph, face down, to the edge of the evidence log you didn't put away fast enough. He looks back up, and you watch his face do something you have never seen it do before, which is nothing. It doesn't change. It doesn't shift or tighten or go pale or do any of the things faces do when they encounter something unexpected. It stays exactly the same. And that is the most frightening thing you have ever seen on a human face, because you have just shown him the shape of what you know, and his response is perfect stillness, and you understand in this moment that you are not looking at the man you thought you knew. You are looking at someone who has been managing this moment in his mind for a long time, who has run this conversation before, who knows exactly where it goes. He steps inside. The door swings shut behind him. "You're here late," he says. His voice is exactly the same. That's the second frightening thing. Warm. Familiar. The voice that told you your father was going to be fine when you didn't believe it yet. Your hand is not moving toward your weapon. Your hand is flat on the table, next to the face-down photograph of Carol Reyes, and your mind is doing the only calculation that matters right now. Not about the case. Not about the evidence. Not about the phone call you haven't made. It's about the 12 feet between you and the door. And the fact that Danny Rourke is standing in front of it. And the fact that he already knows. And the fact that you gave him a key to your apartment 18 months ago, which means the only place you were certain you were safe tonight is now the one place you cannot go. He hasn't moved. He's just looking at you. Waiting. The way he always waits. Patient. Unhurried. As if time is something he has enough of. The clock on the wall ticks. 12:50. You think about Carol Reyes and the 4 people before her, and the word respectful, which you used earlier and immediately hated yourself for. You think about 14 months and 5 victims, and a profiler who flew in from Quantico and a task force that has been hunting the wrong person in the wrong direction this entire time. You think about the spare key. Then you make a decision, and your hand finally moves, and whatever happens in this room in the next 60 seconds, at least one thing is certain. You are not going quietly.